Okay, I think we will make a start then. Good evening and welcome everybody to this British Pain Society webinar, which has been created by the Primary and Community Care Specialist Interest Group. We're just going to speak for a few minutes while we give people a chance to arrive. Many people have perhaps been watching the football, so hopefully we will raise the cheer a little bit after that rather dismal display, I would suggest tonight. So yeah, just a little bit about the BPS before we get started. So it's the British Pain Society is the oldest and the largest multidisciplinary professional organisation in the field of pain within the UK. So it aims to promote education, training, research and development in all fields of pain. And currently there's a multi-professional membership of over 800 and is uniquely, it's a uniquely relevant representative body on all matters related to pain. And we endeavour to increase both the professional and the public awareness of the prevalence of pain and the facilities that are available for its management. So that's the little sort of formal bit out of the way. My name's Dr. Graham Dunthorne. I'm a GP by background, and currently I chair the Primary and Community Care Specialist Interest Group. And in our SIG, we're trying to sort of add to this by creating educational opportunities which are particularly tailored towards healthcare professionals who are working within pain management within the community. Okay, so I'll take the next slide. This is just to draw your attention to the next ASM. Hopefully some of you might have managed to attend the most recent ASM, which was just a few weeks ago. I managed to go for a couple of days myself, and just absolutely amazing to see the different research and activity going on across the UK in the field of pain. So the next one there is in Wales, and it'd be great to see people there. Right, so we'll just skip through a little bit of housekeeping. So what we tend to do with these webinars is just to ask people to add their questions to the Q&A as we go through. I can't promise to get through all of those questions, but we will certainly do our best to ask our speaker some of them. The webinar is being recorded, and that will be available in the BPS YouTube channel afterwards. You will receive a link for this, and you will also receive a link to the evaluation form, which we'd love you to complete, and you will be able to claim your certificate of attendance as well. So that is pretty much it. I'm not going to delay much longer. We are really excited and really happy to have Cormac Ryan with us tonight. He provided me with a really modest bio, which I'm sure could be much, much longer. But he's just asked me to say that he is a professor of clinical rehabilitation at Teesside University, and he's a community pain champion for the Flippin' Pain campaign. He is also with illness currently, so he is doing, we're really grateful that he's still coming, he's still going to give this webinar, but I'm just going to keep a little eye on his kind of vital signs as we go, and we may not go all the way up to 8:30, depending on how Cormac's doing. So obviously tonight, you'll have seen from the title, he's going to talk to us about minding our flipping language. Yeah, it gives me great pleasure to hand you over to Professor Cormac Ryan.
That's very kind of you, Graham. Thanks very much. And thanks to the BPS for inviting me along. I only have man flu, though I think some people might have thought I was on the way out from your introduction, but it's okay. I am going to make it through. But thanks for your kind words. And as I say, thanks for the invite. It's lovely to be here. Let me see if I can just share this. Share with sound. Okay, fingers crossed this works. Right, can you see everything there? Give me a thumbs up. Lovely. Wonderful. Okay. So let's see if we can go from here. So yes, Graham, thanks very much for that introduction. As you say, I'm Professor of Clinical Rehabilitation at Teesside University. I'm also a community pain champion for the Flippin' Pain campaign, a physio by background and a pain scientist. And you're right, I was being modest because I didn't mention that I was Junior Player of the Year at St. Sarns Verban High School in 1995. So, you know, I hide my light under a bush. Okay, right. So, quick declarations of conflicts of interest. So, I'm a named inventor on a medical device for the treatment of phantom limb pain. I'm also leased out by Teesside University to be the community pain champion for the Flippin' Pain campaign, which is run by Connect Health. You know, I don't receive any money directly for my involvement in the campaign, but my university does. With all of these conflicts of interest, I had hoped that right about now I'd be sunning myself in some Mediterranean port, but unfortunately the reality is not quite as rosy. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what the Flippin' Pain campaign is, it's a public health campaign which tries to change public understanding of pain and how it works. As I said, it's primarily funded by Connect Health, who are an independent provider to the NHS, and I'm indebted to them. Without it, without them, this campaign really wouldn't run. So I think it's important to acknowledge that and thank them for all they contribute. And in many occasions we run it in collaboration with NHS trusts. So it's a real sort of, it's a very much a collaborative piece. The campaign has 6 key messages. The persistent pain is common and can affect anyone. Hurt does not necessarily mean harm. Everything matters when it comes to pain. Medicines and surgeries are often not the answer. Understanding your pain can be key, and recovery is possible. We're about changing the way that people think about, talk about, and treat persistent pain. And one of our key target demographics are healthcare professionals. We have a huge impact on the beliefs of the general public. And so any public health campaign that's trying to change public beliefs should have a targeted approach that includes healthcare professionals. So that's really what today's session is about, where we talk about mind your flippin' language, consider the things you say in day-to-day clinical practice. It's going to focus specifically today about metaphors, but it's about language in general as well. So I'm going to start off by introducing this guy. This guy is Tim Slade. I've never met him before. I don't know who he is, but I want to talk about my wife's uncle. And I don't have, he's called Tim Slade, but I don't have a picture of him. So I just found a picture of a random Tim Slade and put it up. The story I want to tell you about my wife's uncle is he's the guy on the street who everyone waits to see what bin he puts out. And then once he puts it out, everyone knows that's the correct bin to put out. Sometimes he goes on social media to the local sort of Facebook group and says, it's green bins tonight. And apparently this is a thing. If you do that, if you're that person, you're a binfluencer, which I thought is one of the coolest names I've ever heard. And it's becoming like a real word. It's becoming more and more used. So the Cambridge Dictionary is keeping an eye on it as a potential word to go into the English language. Now, what I guess it struck me that one of the things we're trying to do within the campaign is create a whole pile of influencers, not binfluencers, but painfluencers. We want to encourage you as healthcare professionals to sort of change how you interact with people to be sort of to change their understanding of pain. So a pain influencer, this definition is a combination of me, ChatGPT, and Lorimer Moseley. We've come to this as a best guess. It's a pain influencer is someone who empowers people to learn about pain, helping them to better prevent, manage, and overcome persistent pain through reduced worry, informed choices, and proactive engagement in healthy behaviors. So I'm going to come back to this towards the end, but hopefully, I suspect many people on this talk are pain influencers already, but hopefully this will encourage you to continue down that line and give you some suggestions on how you might continue to do so. Okay. Right. So this talk really rotates around our third key message from the Flippin' Pain campaign, which is that everything matters when it comes to pain. Pain is a biopsychosocial experience influenced by biological, psychological, and social things. I've just realized I never started the timer on my phone, so I've got to remember that I'm already well into it. Okay. There we go. Okay. So everything matters when it comes to pain, but language matters when it comes to pain. It's hugely, hugely important. As Professor Albus Dumbledore once said, words are, in my not so humble opinion, the most inexhaustible source of magic, capable of both inflicting injury and remedying it. I'm not really sure if J.K. Rowling understood the truth of those words when she wrote them, but there's a real scientific literature that very much backs up what Dumbledore has said, and hopefully I'm just going to give you a bit of a glance at that as we go through. But language can also be complicated, and we can say one thing and it can be interpreted as something very, very different. This is a Glasgow City bus. When I was a student in Glasgow, I remember sitting on one of the seats. I was on my own, and I just started laughing out loud because I had noticed one of the signs which said on it, "When you're at James College, the only way is up." Now, it was obviously an advert to come to James College, and the guys who did marketing at James College thought this is an awesome thing to say. We're conveying that if you come to James College, then you're going to get a smashing education and you're on an upward trajectory. I read it as, if you're at James College, you've hit rock bottom. There is no worse institution you can come to than this one. And it struck me that it's all to do with how it's subsequently interpreted. You can be well-meaning, but even seemingly straightforward language can have negative repercussions. As I said, tonight I want to talk specifically about, or mostly about metaphor and the importance of metaphor. We published a paper in Frontiers in Pain Research towards the end of last year, and this talk is loosely based around that. And I want to acknowledge the two co-authors of this, Professor Mark Johnson and Matt Hudson. When I say I co-authored it, I was very much the spare wheel on this article. These two guys really drove it, and I was very privileged to be involved and contribute in a small way. But I want to acknowledge them here in this slide. Okay, so what are metaphors? So they're words used to describe something else in a way that is different from its normal use, in order to show that the two things have the same qualities. An example there is Heart of Stone. These are the basic building blocks of thought and concepts, and they underpin the way that we think. It's quite remarkable how vital they are in our cognitions and building our understanding of things, and how inbuilt they are in our everyday language. You know, even just saying building blocks of concepts is a metaphor right there. Everyday language is just full of metaphors. And metaphorical thinking, it comes into its own when you talk about abstract things. It's a way of yes, shaping our reality, and it's about a way of describing the intangible, and that's why it's so pivotal in pain-related language, because pain is so intangible. There are few things that represent that so well as pain. These metaphors, they're a tool to project our private experiences, our sensations, our feelings, our thoughts. It's a way of trying to understand your own bodily experiences and communicate it to other people. And that's yes, it's metaphor and figurative language. This is very much about figurative language rather than strictly metaphor per se. But it doesn't necessarily just have to be about language. It could be about images and pictures. There's a really good picture of Frida Kahlo there in the broken column, where she represented her pain, inner experiences of pain through art, and through metaphorical art. And it's extremely powerful, and it's an important way of communicating. And one of the sort of, I guess, giants of metaphorical theory is George Lakoff, who developed the cognitive metaphor theory. And he posited this idea that thought is only possible when we talk about non-metaphorical thought is possible only when we talk about purely physical reality. As soon as we go into non-physical things, then by default, we have to go into metaphor. And the greater the level of abstraction, the greater the layers of metaphor that are needed. And that's, again, that's why it lends itself to be so important in the pain field. So in pain, we don't choose metaphor. We don't choose to use metaphors to talk about it and communicate it. We're forced to do it because there's no literal language for it. It's as Biro said, it's either metaphor or continued absence of speech. So it's something that we just have to do. So what makes a metaphor? Well, there's a source domain that is shared by others, so something like an enemy, and then a target domain or concept like pain that you're trying to help people understand. And thus the idea that pain is an enemy comprises the concept that we're trying to understand pain and a concept from which we draw a metaphorical expression, e.g., an enemy. So pain as an enemy is considered a primary metaphor, and it spawns secondary metaphors like fighting pain and painkillers. And there's a nice example of metaphor here on the left, and it's a previous British Pain Society advert campaign, which talks about I beat cancer. So to get and the British Pain Society needs your support if you would like to help us fight pain. So it's very much in that metaphorical pain is the enemy sphere. Now, we'll talk about this approach to metaphor a little bit further down the line. For a moment, have a think about how you feel about taking that type of metaphor and applying that type of metaphor to pain in your conversations in the clinic. Is it something you use yourself, that pain is an enemy metaphor? I'm sure your patients will use it all the time. Do you use it? Is it something you encourage? What are the pros and cons to that? I will talk about it a little bit more as we go. Okay, so pain metaphor, hopefully you'll see at this point, it has a great deal of utility. Because it really is the language of pain. We use it to understand pain in ourselves, to share that pain with others to help them understand what we're thinking, to share that pain with healthcare professionals when we're the patient, and then for healthcare professionals to explain pain to patients. And it's particularly important, I would say, in tonight's context here. As healthcare professionals, we will use metaphor all the time to help patients better understand their pain and how it works, with the view of trying to reduce fear, anxiety, worry, and encourage them to do sort of healthy behaviors. But we really need to think about whether we're using the best metaphors to do that, and whether, in fact, when we use some of the metaphors we use, whether they're having the completely opposite effect. One of the classic sort of line of metaphors are biomechanical metaphors. Again, these are ones you'll be really, really familiar with. They infer, whether intentionally or not, the idea that the body's damaged, fragile or weak, and slow to heal. So things like bone on bone and wear and tear are classic metaphors you will hear. And I've got what they might sort of represent, a pair of worn out shoes on the right. People may interpret these metaphors, and they do, really, really literally. Believing things like vertebral discs slip. Well, of course, that's just not how they work. They don't shoot out. They're not sort of built in that way. But it's a very powerful metaphor, and it's one that's really ingrained itself. And it in turns shapes everyone's understanding of the problem. And it may inadvertently strengthen negative rumination. And these sorts of metaphors are often really destructive. And they're insidious. You use them and you just don't notice you're using. As I say, they're just built in to our language. So at this point, I thought I'd have a quick check to see if people can use the chat function at this point. I thought we might have a quick go at some metaphors here. So I've created a catchphrase of a metaphor, and I'm wondering, can anyone tell me what that catchphrase is? Let's have a quick look at the chat. Magic bullet! Yes! Yes, it is. Awesome. Well done. There you are. That was 5 minutes well spent. Really, really good. Okay, so yes, we've got the boy wizard magic bullet example. Now, we talked about biomechanical metaphors. Warmongering and war-based metaphors fit very much with that biomechanical. They are different, but they're related. And war-based metaphors really came into their own with the development of germ theory in the 1800s, and they became ingrained in sort of medical language. The idea that we're battling against disease and we're searching for the magic bullet. These sorts of war-based metaphors really lend themselves to this idea of essentially wanting a quick fix. They align themselves with that style of thinking. And again, they in turn are really inbuilt into damage metaphors. Warmongering and damage metaphors they go hand in hand. They are ways of expressing and thinking about our sensations, our emotions, our thoughts, treatments, and strategies for relief. And they create a sort of a strategic alignment between all of these that very much encourage a biomedical based understanding of pain. They reinforce it over and over again, very much at odds with contemporary scientific understanding, which is very much more rooted in a biopsychosocial model. Not saying that the biopsychosocial model doesn't have its problems, but it's an infinitely better model and fit for pain than the biomedical model.
I did actually get to.
Now, this next clip, as you may have seen, is of Pete Moore. Some of you may have seen this clip already. It's a really beautiful example of a damage-based metaphor used in the clinical setting and having really iatrogenic negative consequences, probably with zero thought whatsoever from the healthcare profession. Okay, hopefully you can hear this.
I did actually get to have an MRI scan, and it showed up that I had degeneration of the discs in my lower back. It's the two lower vertebrae and one in the centre. What they've shown is more or less like bone was sort of rubbing on bone, really. So, okay, but the words they use, okay, I guess at the time frightened me. They use this word degeneration. I think, God, well, if I've got something degenerative, and I better just be really careful what I do. So again, I had this thinking, well, if I've got something degenerated, I better not be too active in case I wear things out even more. And they also told me that when they showed me this, they said, oh, your spine is like a digestive biscuit. Again, I thought if I move at all, I may make things worse. But by not moving, as I found out later on, I was making things a little bit worse because I was becoming more and more deconditioned.
Imagine telling a person your spine is like a digestive biscuit. It's a perfect example of a negative, inaccurate information housed within a metaphor that changes the person's thinking and understanding of their pain. They couldn't even use a robust biscuit like a hobnob that would give it kind of a sense of strength and sort of, as I say, robustness. They used the digestive. Poor old Pete must have just been avoiding cups of tea in case he magically dissolved. It's a really neat example of negative metaphor, damage-based metaphor coming into healthcare professional language and having a significant impact on how the patient themselves understand their pain and the behaviors that they subsequently undertake. So misunderstanding of pain as always being due to tissue damage is inherent in damage and war-based metaphors. And they result in sort of vigilance, and hypervigilance, this idea of always being on the lookout for an attack. They engender that sort of state. And they foster thoughts of suffering and being unsafe, fostering fear, worry, hopelessness, and despair, just negative expectations about the pain itself, what the pain means, what it represents. And it encourages a state of persistent fight and flight, like one is constantly in a battle, in a war type situation. And it just kind of feeds into that sympathetic system. And it encourages oversimplified thinking. This idea of a quick fix, a magic bullet, if you will, which again, very much in keeping with that biomedical approach, and quite a distance away from modern pain management. But we as healthcare professionals may not actually notice that. I certainly have been guilty of this for many years, not really thinking about the language I use and the metaphors that I use, not giving them the due credit that they deserve, not really appreciating just how fundamental metaphor is as that building block of thought to how we understand and communicate about pain. And it fosters this idea of an end game of winning or losing. There's no space for management at all in the sort of damage, warmongering type metaphorical language. So as the title of the paper suggests, we literally need to change our metaphors. We need much better metaphors in pain discourse. Especially if we want to switch from people's understanding away from the old biomedical model, hurt means harm model, towards a more biopsychosocial model that everything matters when it comes to pain. We need to make our biopsychosocial metaphors more engaging, more intuitive, more appealing than the biomedical ones. And that's extremely difficult. There's a reason why those biomedical ones have stuck around. They are very powerful, very compelling, and they map very closely to our physical world. And that's why we choose them. And I think it's a kind of a reciprocal situation by using them as a society that just continually reinforces this biomedical view and back and forth between it. By then reinforcing the biomedical view lends itself to us using these types of metaphors over and over again. And it's a vicious circle. Now, if you want to learn about how to construct better metaphors, I highly recommend Explain Pain Supercharged. There's a chapter in there called The Malleable Magic of Metaphors, and it's really, really good. Definitely recommend it. But if you don't have the book, you can go online and check out our paper, because there's a couple of types of metaphors in there which are alternatives to the sort of warmongering and damage type metaphors that you can consider. And they're constructive pain metaphors that try and reflect contemporary scientific understanding, that try and reflect that pain is a protector in line with evolutionary theory, and it very much tries to reflect that biopsychosocial nature of pain. Here's a couple of examples, okay? So instead of talking about fighting pain, you could use the terminology and the metaphor of navigating pain. You know, every day is different. There's a different path on my pain journey. It's a much more malleable, less threatening metaphor, and you'll see this right the way through. Pain is weather. Okay, so instead of pain as a thunderstorm of suffering, you could do something like pain is like a cloud, sometimes dark and looming, but eventually moving on. It's changeable. It can change. It's not permanent. Or pain is a teacher. And this is one that I don't know if any of you have looked at people who have what they call an insensitivity pain. Now, I know that's a misnomer in itself, and it's clumsy language. It's not so much an insensitivity to pain, but rather an inability to experience pain. But if you ever talk to people with that condition, and if you read about them, they talk about that important teaching role that pain has. And they view it through a different lens. Their understanding of pain is different, and hence they use different metaphors to talk about it. And I guess I know there's a sort of a chicken and an egg situation there, but perhaps if we used more positive metaphors, we could begin to change understanding in a more positive way. Pain is waves. So instead of a shooting pain is a tsunami of suffering. Consider things like pain comes in waves, sometimes big, sometimes small, but I ride them as they come. I'm a surfer. I learn to ride the waves of pain. And then pain is a companion. So the idea that instead of saying it engulfs me or it's part of me, yeah, it's part of me, but it's not the whole of me. It's a companion on the journey, but not the driver. And then this is one I really, really like as the last example I'll give. It's of pain as a window. Instead of the idea that pain has shattered my entire life, pain is like a window pane, sometimes clear, sometimes fogged, but always providing a perspective. Or like a cracked window, pain can distort, but doesn't necessarily block the view. So I want you to see if you can have a go. I'd really like to hear about what metaphors that you guys might use in your everyday clinic. If we have any come through in the chat, it will be really, really funky. Do you have any metaphors you use that are not damage based, that are not war based, or biomechanical based, but are something else, more constructive, more positive, that you use that might align themselves to what we've already seen there? Are there any in the chat that might reflect that? Or, oh, let's see. Okay. Can't hear it. I don't think that's exactly what I was looking for. I'm guessing that was for the video with Pete, but nonetheless. Okay, we'll leave it there. Should anyone feel the need, or a light switch? Okay, I'd be really interested to hear how you use it as what light switch means. What are you trying to convey with light switch? So that there's the pain being like a burglar alarm, where the sensitivity can be set too high or too low, going off at a cat or the wind. Yeah, we need the system to keep us safe, but don't want the sensitivity to be too high. Pain is an alarm. Yeah, pain is a guard dog. Pain is a part of me which I have to accept and work with. Pain as an overactive motion detector. So you guys clearly are using some really, really nice metaphors and language with your patients. And that's really, really important. And we have to try and, obviously you guys are going to be a specialist community. But we need to encourage more healthcare professionals to use these types of metaphors when they're communicating with patients. We need to understand just how crucially important they are. Okay. So just one other very brief mention on that. When you're doing sort of, I guess, pain education, it's really, really important. This is a slight aside to metaphors and language, that you try and get that interaction with the person you're talking to. Modern, I think, pain science education has really embraced educational theory more and more, and it's trying to move away from that sort of didactic approach, that it's sort of a one-way type information. Now, in a context like this, it's extremely hard to get some back and forth, but where you can, I really, really encourage you to do it, because it does have a much more powerful influence on changing understanding, changing knowledge, changing beliefs, etc. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of direct you to this really neat paper by Stewart and Loftus in 2018, where they talk about the challenge of language that people use, words to avoid, and what's more, they give alternatives. So they don't just say don't use this word or this language. They say consider using these other strategies. Now, I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're a really nice way of making that point of how important it is to keep our language in a more positive light. So let's now look at the evidence, because a lot of what the metaphor paper that I've talked about, it's about theory, and it's about stimulating sort of debate and exploring the importance of language. But what evidence do we have that language is actually has the potential to have clinical impact and change people's experiences? So this is if we look at the short term first, this is a study I really, really like. If you haven't come across it, I definitely recommend reading it. It's by Varelman in 2010. It's a randomized controlled trial where they had 140 pregnant women who were receiving neuraxial analgesia. And they had two groups. One group, when they were receiving the local anesthetic, they were receiving information about it in a positive way. They said, we're going to give you a local anesthetic that will numb the area and you will be comfortable during the procedure. And then the other 50% of the population were randomized to receive the information in a more negative way. Now look at the metaphorical language that's used and that negative metaphorical language. So you're going to feel a big bee sting. This is the worst part of the procedure, very much emphasizing a negative expectation. Unsurprisingly, what happened was when delivering the injection, those who received the negative information experienced higher levels of pain when the injection was delivered. And it's a kind of a perfect example of iatrogenic counterintuitive results, when clearly that's warning someone about the impending pain is an attempt to try and prepare, calm, and reassure. But by using negative language and a damage-based metaphor and threatening metaphor, those harsher words actually increase the pain experience. How this comes about, it's not. It's difficult to untangle, but there's some really nice evidence by Benedetti, who talks about the importance of anxiety in that process, and when anxiety is addressed or controlled for or reduced, you take away that negative expectation and that negative harmful effect. So there's something about our language that when it induces anxiety, that's when it unnecessarily lends itself to worsening the pain experience. Language is also important in the longer term. So this is again a really nice study by Setchell, where they interviewed they interviewed 130 people with back pain, and what they found was most thought of their backs as a broken machine. Again, see that very clear damage type metaphor that comes in, and that once it had broken, it was permanently broken. But when asked, where did people get this information? Almost 90% of people got these ideas from healthcare professionals, which made me think of Taylor Swift, who's currently doing the UK tour at the moment. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Where we by default inadvertently perpetuate and instigate these biomedical beliefs that are not in keeping with contemporary scientific understanding through often through poor language and poor choice of metaphor. And this it's by Ben Darlow, who does a lot of work in this area, just reinforcing that idea of how important it is that we're careful about what we say, because it has a lasting impact on the attitudes and beliefs people have about pain, which, as we know, has a significant impact on the subsequent pain experience and its associated disability. Okay, so the take-home message is that everything matters, including language, when it comes to pain, and that hopefully the idea of painfluencers will catch on, and you yourself will think about how you can be a painfluencer, someone that kind of really tries to empower people to learn about pain, helping them to better prevent, manage, and overcome persistent pain through reduced worry, informed choices, and proactive engagement in healthy behaviors. Just before I finish up, there's some references. I want to, now this is very unusual for me. I want to, usually I have a very standard slide at the end, which is somehow managed to skip away. But it's super important that I acknowledge Pain Revolution in Australia, which is a big supporter of flippin' pain and what it does. And we're indebted to Lorimer, who leads the Pain Revolution, and his team for their continued support. And yeah, I just wanted to make that clear. And I also want to thank everyone included in the Flippin' Pain campaign, all the people with lived experience who are very much front and center, the healthcare professionals who are involved in it, and Richard Pell, who's the director, and Sam Fielding, who's the co-director. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, especially all of you who have foregone the football to come and listen. Yeah, happy to field any questions.
Thank you so much, Cormac. Thank you for a fantastic presentation, and wow, some incredible food for thought. Are you still alive and well and with us?
Yes, I think I'll make it through. Fingers crossed.
Okay. So we'll go to we'll try and go to some questions then. So this first one,
unless they're difficult questions. If they're difficult questions, then I'm really choking up. I'm not sure I'm going to make it through. Just putting that out there.
I think you come with a fairly tricky subject matter, to be fair. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So this first one, I was going to try and link a couple of things together here. So totally on board with the main message of the webinar. I do sometimes find, this is from Tom, by the way, that the pervasive nature of some negative metaphors makes trying to replace them really hard, and can sometimes find the patient feels dismissed or invalidated. And I'll just link that a little bit as well to a couple more things. One, that I wonder whether do you feel that we tend to get a bit used to our metaphors? We find the ones that we like and we like to use, and actually molding those in a way that land nicely with lots of different patients can be difficult. And I'm just going to link that to something back at 7:40 as well, that Jean said, who's a patient who's listening tonight, that I want you to, just because people are writing in the chat, I keep losing it now. I want you to listen to how I describe my pain and what it means to me. So I guess that's
I think
together.
Sorry, what was the name of that last lady?
Jean.
Jean, I couldn't agree more. And I think it comes back a little to this idea of good communication being two-way, which a medium like this doesn't really facilitate that particularly well. But I would hope that a really good healthcare professional who is thoughtful about the language they use really listens to what the person in front of them is saying and considers how they can use that language constructively back to try and address any thoughts or beliefs that might be leading them down a difficult direction. I believe that a better understanding of pain, a more biopsychosocial understanding that's less fearful, less worry provoking, is an important part for many of a recovery journey, and using positive, helpful language that is in keeping with a biopsychosocial approach, I think is a really important part of that. But if you want to change someone's concept of something, I really like conceptual change theory, and especially the old stuff. I'm one of these people who enjoys reading, like listening to 60s music, stuff like that. I don't, go, modern music is fine, but I do find myself gravitating towards older stuff. And there are newer versions of conceptual change theory, but I really like Posner's original stuff back in the 80s, where he talked about the importance of four key pillars to help people reconceptualize new ideas, and new scientific ideas. I talked about it being, people need to be dissatisfied with their current understanding to facilitate a reconceptualization. The new concept that you're giving needs to be understandable and plausible. Those two things are different. The way I usually talk about that is saying that aliens built the pyramids. It's understandable, but it's not plausible. And your new concept that you're giving needs to be both. But finally, it needs to be relevant. And when we've mapped sort of qualitative interviews of people before and after sort of pain education, what we found is that when people feel that the information being provided is relevant to them, that's kind of when the magic happens. If they feel that the information you're giving is not relevant to them, it falls short. It doesn't connect. It doesn't stick. And coming back to Jean's point, I think one way of trying to make it relevant, make it connect, is trying to use the person's own language and their own words. I think if you do that, it can really help in that reconceptualization process. That's a very long-winded answer to that question.
No, but it was a lovely finish, and it actually links really nicely to this next question, which is a fantastic question, and it's from Georgina. And when we talk about using people's own language, Georgina's asking, are there any conversations happening within Flipping Pain around language and neurodiversity? No. So this, I guess, is about metaphors and how you go about using metaphors with, I guess, particularly perhaps people with ASD, who may really actually struggle with the use of metaphors, and yeah,
it's a really good question, and rule 101 when doing public speaking: if you're asked a question that you know very little about, don't try and make it up, because people will know the other side that you're trying to make it up. This isn't something that I know a great deal about. I know the neurodiversity and pain management, I think, is an extremely exciting area. I know it's kind of exploding now in terms of new knowledge and new information, and more research happening on it. But even there, I use negative metaphors inadvertently. Yeah. Can I think of a more positive way of saying that? It's a beautiful waterfall of new research into that area, but it's not an area of research that I've really gotten to grips with yet, and it's not something as yet the campaign has really looked into, but it's a really good point. One of the things we've, again, coming back to this idea of relevance, we have recorded a series of different presentations targeting people with different pain conditions. And the essence of them is still very much the same. The messages are still very much the same, but the language we use is bespoke to that condition. So, for example, we're talking specifically about fibromyalgia and people with fibromyalgia rather than people with chronic pain. And you could look at it and go, well, why have you recorded two very, very similar sessions and just made those differences? And again, it's all to do with relevance and connecting with the audience. It's if that person doesn't think you're talking about them and they can't relate that information to themselves, then you hit the mark and you don't produce that conceptual change. So if you're talking to someone with fibromyalgia and you keep talking about chronic pain, it's very easy for them to say, well, but that's not me. I have fibromyalgia. And it just doesn't hit home. So we've tried to really think about, right, well, what can we tweak to try and get that message across? And I think it's a really good point about, we haven't done that for a neurodiversity and people from that sort of community or group. And I think there will be a lot of merit in that, but it's not an area that I have any great knowledge of.
Yeah, I think so. I think Gabrielle here has kind of expanded that a little bit. It's sort of similar question, I think, but talking about, health inequalities and different levels of health literacy, and obviously people coming from different cultures and ethnicities. So perhaps, I don't know, could we use I don't know if this might be really hard, but if we use an example, perhaps you've mentioned Lorimer, so let's maybe talk about something like Tame the Beast. And obviously that's something that people is used really quite widely now, I think, and people learn that. But can that be quite, tricky to sort of, talk us through how you might use that with difficult groups of people, let's say.
Yeah, so I guess first of all, I'd say I love Tame the Beast. I'll be the first one to say that I am and always have been a huge fanboy of Lorimer and what he does and that stuff. So I use it a lot. But one of the things that within our group at the moment we're exploring is this issue of health inequalities and working with people from minoritized groups and people who speak English as a second language or don't speak it at all. We've got two studies going on at the moment, or two bodies of work going on at the moment, which I'm going to talk about very, very briefly. So one is a piece of work which is being done by a chap called Sam Brown. Sam's a physio doing his NIHR pre-doctoral fellowship with me. I was just coming towards the end of that. And as part of that work, he did a survey of healthcare professionals, asking them about their experience of delivering pain science education via an interpreter. And the barriers and facilitators to that. It's a really, really interesting piece of work. And what was very clear was that there was a tendency for the healthcare professional to be more stressed when delivering pain science education via an interpreter, and for them to be less confident that the person has understood or what has been said to them, that they've sort of reconceptualized their understanding of pain. Quite a sharp, a sizable difference. And all of the respondents came up with lots and lots of barriers and experienced lots of barriers when communicating via an interpreter about pain education. Very, very few facilitators but it included a qualitative piece where people were asked to kind of write free text about it. And one of the central issue was trust. People's trust in the interpreter, and that it's being interpreted correctly, and sort of huge concerns that it wasn't. Now, whether those concerns are founded or not is a totally different matter. But I think if the healthcare professional is more stressed and less confident that they're hitting home, if we think about all the relevance issues, etc., then you can see how health inequalities and pain begin to occur. If you think about something like pain education, which is really central to good pain management, I would argue, and I think there's a good body of evidence to show it's an important, very important factor. If people who don't speak the language are already at a disadvantage of trying to get that information, so it highlights the importance of the dearth of materials in different languages and that are culturally appropriate. And that brings me on to the second study, which is done by a lady called Jit Pun. So Jit is of Asian heritage, and she's done a qualitative study with healthcare professionals. So she's also doing it with patients at the moment. That data is being collected, interviewing people from minoritized ethnic groups in the UK, but they can speak English, so there's not a language barrier. And what she's noted, her data from healthcare professionals, and I'm not going to talk about this too much because I don't want to it's her data, and it's her data that's coming out, but it highlighted that there's a real concern about cultural competency amongst healthcare professionals, that there's a worry that they don't know enough about people from different cultures to communicate education correctly and appropriately, and how challenging it can be for people from, let's say, white British communities and backgrounds to talk to people from minoritized groups, how they seem to be nervous and concerned about what they say, reticent to say certain things, and worried that they may insult that individual, which is a perfectly understandable concern. But as a result, people might shy away from trying to do that sort of good communication and that good education, which again highlights those inequalities, and that how people from minoritized backgrounds are being sort of, for want of a better word, robbed of a really central pillar of good pain management. And it highlights the desperate need for more co-produced pain education materials that are bespoke to different cultures and languages. I don't think that's beyond us. And I think people are doing some great work in this area, and I hope that it becomes more and more to the fore. It's a hugely important issue.
Yeah, shows how far we've come, really, that we kind of have, even though we've got a long way to go, we do have great pain education resources, and we're actually sort of starting to think about these things, about how we sort of make those accessible to everyone in a diverse and multicultural societies. Amazing, really. Should we move on to Cedric, you could speak all day about these things, but yeah, so this question here It's quite interesting, this one. I guess it's a little bit about belief systems and people's concepts of life that they kind of generate through language and things. And it refers to trying to change patients whose own language is about fighting pain. And those patients who've actually sort of take pride and courage in that idea. This is how they kind of identify, I guess, with their pain and life with pain and everything. So yeah, what's your thoughts there, Cormac?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't discount that, and I think we have an awful long way to go with language and metaphor, and really understanding its potential and how it should be used. And someone who gets a great deal of benefit and encouragement from metaphors that are perhaps more in keeping with the that sort of fight and war type and metaphor. I'm not trying to say that it's we should necessarily stop them from using something that they find beneficial. However, I don't think that we need to necessarily reinforce it. I think in the language we use, we can perhaps try and reframe things. I think reframing is an extremely powerful tool that we don't use enough. And when we talk about pain, reframing is a really crucial part of it. And a very well-placed reframe can be really powerful and help make someone perhaps think about their pain in a different way. I mean, I think if someone is managing well and is able to live a fulfilling life with their pain, and alongside that they're using language that's not necessarily fully in keeping with the biopsychosocial model or positive metaphors, then best of luck to them. Do you know, that's the coping mechanism that they've found that helps them to keep going. That's fine. But I suspect if they're coming in to see healthcare professionals, they've had pain for a very long time, perhaps those metaphors aren't being as helpful as it might first seem that they are. And gentle reframing might be a step towards reconceptualizing and setting on a different path.
Sure, right. So we'll go to this question because this question links quite nicely to reframing. So it's not so much a question as a comment. In our service, we have signposted a number of patients to the Curable app for pain, and some have come back and reported that it's changed the way they talk about their pain. E.g., rather than saying my neck feels tight, they would say my neck could be, sorry, I reframed that very badly there. Rather than saying my neck feels tight, they would say my neck could be looser. And just to slightly add into that as well, because there are, of course, some studies and thinking within pain that actually we should just reframe that word altogether. And actually, it's quite helpful for people to not speak about their pain, or not constantly talk about their pain to themselves, in their own internal language and things.
Yeah, it's certainly in a negative way. That's for sure. I'm a huge believer in positive reframing and using that clinically. As I work as a healthcare professional, it's something I try and encourage my patients to do. What was going to? I've gone off on a tangent and I've completely forgotten what the question is. Graham, would you mind?
It's really just.
I'm going to blame the man flu there for a second. Can you say that again?
Curable app and reframes and
Yeah. Yeah. So, first of all, I'll acknowledge that we're currently doing some research on the Curable app. There's a wonderful physio called Alicia Doy, who's being supervised by Jaj Mankalau at Teesside University. I'm second supervisor, and the third supervisor is a lady called Nikki Jones. So Nikki is a person with lived experience of pain. She's also recently trained as a health coach. Really interesting lady, based in Wales, actually. Just as you're having your event in Wales in 2025, really insightful. But the reason why we're exploring Curable is actually as a result of conversations with her. She talks very positively about it, and she, I guess, put me in touch with other people with lived experience for whom it was an important step on their journey in a sort of in a different way. We use the term recovery. I know that's almost a purposely antagonizing word. We use it in its most open sense. Recovery can mean a reduction in pain, but it can also mean just feeling better in yourself despite your pain, or being able to return to work despite your pain, etc. But going back to Curable, it was Nikki who was very positive about it, and through conversations with her and other people with lived experience, we thought, well, look, let's explore it. Now, I've also encountered people who didn't find it valuable, but I think its approach to sort of reframing, I think it has the potential to be really powerful for a lot of people. And I love the thought that it might encourage engender empowerment. I think for those people who get it and who it resonates with, it maps to this idea of changing language, flipping your language, coming into more positive metaphors, and it has clearly, for a number of people, had a really powerful effect. So where Alicia is looking at this qualitatively with people, I think she's going to. She works in North Tees NHS Trust. I think she's going to be exploring it in the pain management service there with Jamie Watson, who do some really cool pain education stuff.
Fantastic. We're getting through them now, Cormac. So this one, this is a really interesting question. It's about metaphor and autonomy, really. So using the weather as an example. So does that have a negative impact on people's self-efficacy and autonomy? Because they might feel that the weather is what it is and you can't really change it. We don't have much control over the weather.
Yeah. I think if a metaphor doesn't resonate with you, I certainly wouldn't use it. I think the emphasis that we've talked about in the paper when talking about using something like weather is to show that, look, it's not always bad. It changes. It's malleable. It's not set in stone. And there are things you can do. You can to bring an umbrella with you. You can go indoors for a short period, or you can take you can influence how it interacts with you to some extent. But I think the real essence of why we used it was this idea of impermanence, and that that things can pass, can change. And I think that's really important. The idea that things can change, I think is hugely important. We did a series of sessions on Monday of this week, and we did another one last week where we did they were like, how it's hard to describe them. They were like entertainment CPD. So it was myself and Lorimer Mosley, who's over from Australia at the moment, and we were basically doing with healthcare professionals interaction activities. So they were like skits, trying to make entertainment and audience participation to try and communicate pain concepts, to fitting in with sort of the public health approach that we're trying to foster. But one of the things that I did was um, game shows. So we did Family Fortunes, and in the Family Fortunes, we asked about sort of people's experience. We asked 100 people with persistent pain, what's like the worst thing that someone with a healthcare professional has ever said to you? And it was really, really interesting things back. But one of those things that was high up on the agenda was being told that there's no hope, that there's nothing that can be done. Obviously, that wasn't science, it was playing, it was fun, but it resonates with the literature about this idea of hopelessness. I always say to patients that you can improve. Everyone has the capacity to improve. If we look at pain management programs, consistently we see a reduction in pain. I'm not saying everyone's pain goes away. Absolutely, it doesn't. In these journal articles, but consistently we see a reduction. Pain can change. People's experience can change, and I think that's a really, really important message. And I think there's more and more studies coming out to show that good education and reframing, it can be a really powerful component of that. There's is it the Restore trial by Mosley's group? I correct me please if I'm wrong. There's a recent RCT which looked at essentially pain science education versus a really cool a control group where they delivered a sort of a sham therapy, a really well thought out sham therapy, and the pain education informed care brought about a bigger effect. But they did a secondary analysis to look at the mediating effects, and it was those change in beliefs that was really central to the improvement that was seen within people. Good education that changes people's understanding of pain. For my part, I think the evidence is pushing us in that direction. I'm not saying it has to be for everyone, but I think it should be. It's an important pillar of good management, and the language we use is really important to facilitate that. And indeed, the language we use can easily pull it all apart. I'm sure you will have done it. You'll have seen it yourself, where you will have used carefully constructed language to really communicate a challenging concept, to encourage people to look at it in a certain way, like look at their pain in a certain way, and then you'll see them go out perhaps and talk to their GP, not bad mouthing GPs at all, but any other healthcare professional who perhaps in just 2 sentences says, "Oh, your spine's like a digestive biscuit," and all your good work is very quickly undone. The iatrogenic effect of negative metaphors and negative languages is not to be belittled. And I think if nothing else, we try and take away negative language. I think that's a worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah, sure. And that it's Jenny here said, like about how do we start to break down negative metaphors that have been there for so long, which is really kind of what you're saying, Cormac, isn't it? And I think like there's somebody at the I can't remember who that was, but somebody was talking about this at the conference recently, and they said sort of a little bit, maybe part in jest, but it was so true that actually we do quite a lot to break those negative metaphors down, I think now, and in some ways we've got quite good at that, but maybe it's still then really challenging to explain what chronic pain actually is. So sometimes we kind of go, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, and then we go, it's complex. And
Yeah.
this is what someone said this at the conference. I thought that's so true. Actually, we do that quite a lot.
Yeah. And that's I guess part of the problem. So two things. First of all, there have recently been some really nice things, like moving away from wear and tear to wear and repair, which are kind of catchy ways of saying it, and more a more positive view of the scientific information. Do you know what I mean? This idea that our tissues do repair, which is a really important thing to communicate to our patients. But it's still catchy. Do you know what I mean? It's still got that same element of stickiness, of rhyme and rhythm to it. And that's if we want to really change how people understand things, we've got to find beautiful language that really just grabs people and resonates with them and allows them to think about their pain in a different way, helps them to. But and it's not beyond us. I think we've only just began to scratch the surface of this. The second thing you just mentioned there about the simplicity and the complicatedness. Every now and then, I, for some unknown reason, decide to read a highbrow book. I'll read trash for months on end, and then I'll get some sort of, who knows why, a decision to read something that's weighty. And I remember reading, I don't know if you've ever read War and Peace. When he gets to the end, he starts talking about why people believe certain things, and it's set in the time of the Napoleonic Wars, and he talks about the idea that everyone talked about what a genius Napoleon was, and how when he was doing well, they did well. When he wasn't thinking straight, the French didn't do so well. And he was kind of saying, well, actually, he was only one guy. The communication at the time was terrible. It was far more multifaceted as to why the French would have done well and won some battles compared to others. But we instinctively like, as human beings, simple explanations. We often find the first simple explanation that makes sense to us and say, yes, that's the one, that's it, to the exclusion of all others. And that's the reason. When I was reading that, I immediately went in my mind to the whole trapped nerve explanation. It's such a beautifully simple explanation. And we all gravitate to it and think, what a wonderful explanation. The fact that it's a significant misnomer, that it's hugely overused, and that it has only in a very small minority of patients is something that's relevant. But it's almost like what's your problem? Oh, it's trapped nerve. Like almost every pain is to it because it's so simple, it's so appealing, and until we can find similarly clever and attractive biopsychosocial metaphors, I think we'll always be struggling a little.
Wow, I think that's a pretty awesome punchline to finish on. I mean, I think if you work in pain management for a while, you will have definitely met patients who have pain from their heads to their toes, and they tell you it's because they have a trapped nerve. Yeah.
And it's almost certainly because a healthcare professional has told them that,
For sure.
or several healthcare professionals have told them that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think we're mostly the problem.
Yes, I refrained from mentioning certain groups then, but I think yes, yeah, you're right. And I suppose
we're all guilty. We're all guilty.
And we all can constantly reflect, I guess, on the language that we use.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I think you have completed all the questions in the Q&A, pretty much, and we are pretty much on time as well. So that really just kind of leaves me to thank you again, Cormac. It's been really fantastic this evening. I've enjoyed it ever so much. Thanks to everyone for coming and supporting the webinar. It makes it so much better if we've got people here engaging in questions.
Can I plug the website before I leave,
Plug anything you like.
Flippin Pain, www.flippinpain.co.uk. When I go to conferences and stuff like that, sometimes people come up to and say, we're using your resource, and it gives me great joy because you put stuff on and you think, does anyone ever like use it or view it or value it? But and it's lovely when they do. So please, if you haven't come across the campaign, go check it out. Go check out the website and the resources. If you like them, please pass them on to your patients.
Fantastic, and pass on our regards as well to Richard and to Sam, who obviously arranged for you to be here. And when we reached out, we're so quick to say yes. We will send Cormac along. So fantastic, right? Well, that's it. Have a fantastic evening, everyone, and hopefully we will see you back in July when we're going to have Professor Roger Naggs, talking about opioids and when we may still prescribe them. See you there.